Neoclassical realism. 6 Principles of Morgenthau's political realism. 1. Politics is rooted in permanent and unchanging human nature which is self-centered, self-regarding and self-interested. 2. Politics is an autonomous sphere of action and cannot, therefore, be reduced to economics or to morals. Leaders are guided by the dictates of political wisdom. 3. Self-interest is basic facts of the human condition. States seek their own security and survival. 4. The ethics of politics is political or situational, which is very different from private morality. Thus, leaders burdened by their responsibility to the people should strive not to do the best but rather to do the best the circumstances on that particular time permit. 5. Opposing crusading behavior, imposing ideologies and values because it threatens international peace and security. 6. Statecraft involves a profound awareness of human limitations and imperfections, pessimistic view of human nature. Explains patterns of international events in terms of the system structure, the international distribution of power, rather than the internal makeup of individual states. This approach concurs that international politics is basically a struggle for power but challenges the view that this is a result of human nature. Hence, it attributes security competition and interstate conflict to the lack of an overarching authority above states and the distribution of power in the international system. Systemic factors. Polarity, number of independent power centers in the system, multipolar, bipolar, tripolar, the unipolar. Structural realism. Core assumptions. States and other actors interact in an anarchic environment. The structure of the system is a major determinant of actor behavior. States are self-interest oriented, and an anarchic and competitive system pushes them to favor self-help over cooperative behavior. States are rational actors, selecting strategies to maximize benefits and minimize losses. States see all other states as potential enemies and threats to their national security. Rosso, it is not human nature, but the anarchical system which foster jealousy, suspicion and insecurity. Structural realism. Scholars in security studies present 2 forms of realism, defensive and defensive realism. Offensive realists highlight the importance of relative power. Defensive realists recognizes the cost of war and assume that it usually emanates from irrational forces in a society. They admit that expansionary states willing to use force make it impossible to live in a world without weapons. Thus, cooperation is possible, but more likely to succeed in relations with friendly states. Walt's anarchy leads to a logic of self-help in which states seek to maximize security. Defensive realism. According to this form of structural realism, the most stable distribution of power in the system is bipolarity. The other camp, Mearsheimer, the anarchical self-help system, forces states to maximize their relative power position. Defensive realism, global hegemony. Structural realism. Kenneth Waltz's structural realism has had a major impact on IR theory scholarship. Waltz claims that the structure of the international system is the main factor in shaping the behavior of states. Nevertheless, Waltz concurs with traditional realists that major powers still determine the nature of the international system. Structural realists minimize the significance of national attributes as determinants of a state's foreign policy. Structural realists accept many assumptions of traditional realism. They believe that force is a critical tool of statecraft and balance of power is still the central mechanism for order. Contemporary realists. New approaches since the end of the Cold War, dissent from both defensive and offensive forms of structural realisms. Neoclassical realists bring into the fold unit-level variables such as how power is perceived and how leadership is exercised. Places domestic politics, such as the perceptions of state leaders, State-society relations, as intervening variable between the distribution of power and foreign policy behavior. Rational choice realism claims that institutions matter and seek to apply realism to all states. Hegemonic stability theory, international economic order is dependent on the existence of a dominant state. Neo-realism, strategic realism. Schelling pays little attention to normative aspects of realism. This form focuses on foreign policy decision-making, game theory. Observations. There is a lack of consensus in the literature as to whether we can speak about realism as a single coherent theory. The most important cleavage differences between those who grant theoretical primacy to human nature and those who advocate the importance of systemic factors, international anarchy and the distribution of power in the international system. However, all realists subscribe to statism, survival and self-help. Observations. Statism is the centerpiece of realism. This involves two claims. 1. The state is the main actor. 2. State sovereignty signifies the existence of an independent authority. Key criticism. Statism is flawed. On empirical grounds there are challenges to state power from above and below, for example, the emergence of other actors. On normative grounds, the inability of sovereign states to respond to collective global problems such as famine, environmental degradation and human rights abuses. Observations. Survival. The primary objective of all states is survival. This is the supreme national interest. All other goals, for example, economic prosperity, low politics, are secondary. Actions of leaders must be judged according to the outcome rather than the means. Ethic of responsibility. Positive outcomes may result from amoral actions. Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombing. Criticism. There are no limits to what actions a state can take in the name of necessity. Observations. Self-help. No other state can be relied upon to guarantee your survival. The structure of the international system does not permit friendship, trust and honor. Only a perennial condition of uncertainty generated by the absence of a global government. Security dilemma. Coexistence is achieved through the maintenance of the balance of power. Limited cooperation is possible in interactions where the realist state stands to gain more than other states. Criticism. Self-help is not an inevitable consequence of the absence of a world government. It is a logic that states have selected. There are also historical and contemporary examples where states have preferred collective security systems or forms of regional security communities in preference to self-help. Observations. Other criticisms. Realism is too narrowly focused, ignores important facets of international life. It overlooks the cooperative strain in human nature. States are not only in conflict, they also share common interests and observe common rules. Ignores other important actors such as human beings, NGOs. Plays down the influence of international law. There are also other values besides national interest. Rationality. Most realists, and many non-realists, assume that those who wield power while engaging in statecraft behave as rational actors in their efforts to influence others. Two implications of this view. 1. Assumption of rationality implies that states and other international actors can identify their interests and put priorities on various interests. Unitary actor, or strong leader, assumption. Rationality. 2. The assumption that the exercise of power attempts to advance the national interest, which is not always clear. Rationality implies that actors are able to perform a cost-benefit analysis, calculating the costs incurred by a possible action and the benefits it is likely to bring. Not easy to tally intangible political benefits against tangible costs of a war. Costs and benefits can be miscalculated. Human behavior and luck can be unpredictable.